the level of Texas Chainsaw Massacre or something like that. And you're right. This is on YouTube. This was shown on television. This was directed toward kids. It involved kids in it. And this was their idea of, oh, this is just funny, because the idea is, and this is what they can't stand. And even people like Tom Friedman, the New York Times, has been caught praising China's dictatorial policies because they don't allow dissent and they can just do what's, quote, like right for the people. They don't like dissent. They don't like anyone disagreeing, and this is what they wish they could do. And it falls in line, blowing up someone's head and blowing them up in the classroom, falls in line with what they've stated. Nuremberg-style trials for global warming skeptics, crimes against humanity if you disagree, treason from Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It goes on down the line. These are not isolated cases. This was not, oh, just a little satirical video they showed. This was their inner impulse. And in terms of the the looks, if you will, of Professor Carrie Norgaard, it isn't her outside looks. It's people always say, well, it's the inner beauty. It's what's on the inside. And the bottom line is her views and her sociological studies are rotten to the core. They're ultimately anti-human nature. And all we're doing is pointing that out. And for YouTube, it seems to be here having a massive double standard to allow this kind of stuff. As far as I know, you can watch Robert F. Kennedy Jr. give his speech calling for treason for political figures who disagree on man-made global warming. That hasn't been pulled. But yet, you question someone, start going after some of their what have been accurately dubbed totalitarian views and Stalinistic views. And there's an update, by the way, to that, Alex, which is even more Stalinist than we talked about the other day. That this is ridiculous on its face, and this is clearly, if you will, a witch hunt.
Mark, continue. Get into this new update, because they're now going into the memory hole and actually excising things in her paper.
Yes, what's happened is, since you, of course, highlighted it, we had a Climate Depot, Rush Limbaugh has brought it up, the Drudge Reports featured it, multiple UK papers. This made international firestorm. The idea that global warming skeptics were something somehow wrong with them, and that we were akin to racist and slave owners, and that we needed to be treated. Well, the University of Oregon, where Professor Carrie Norgaard, the sociologist, actually resides, decided that this didn't exist anymore. They removed the words treatment, treated from the website. It no longer exists. They didn't make a notation. They didn't make an announcement. They offered no explanation. Just poof, it was gone. And it goes deeper. Professor Carrie Norgaard's page at the University of Oregon went missing. Era, 404 era, web, nowhere to be found. Her email address, gone, replaced with a private or some Yahoo type email address, no longer a university email address. And on my website, Climate Depot, we called this Stalinesque. This was rewriting of history, Soviet style. Here you have a controversy, someone you don't like. She I guess somehow the powers that be decided she was a liability at that moment for the global warming community. So they went poof and disappeared her. And this is just like on my website. I have a book called The Commissar Vanishes. Stalin, as different commissars in the old Soviet Union would fall out of his favor, would either be sent to the Gulag or murdered, would then just new photos of them would appear with Stalin, and they would just be absent, just no explanation missing from the photos. And as time went on, commissar after commissar would slowly disappear, and suddenly you just had Stalin standing alone. Well, that's what the University of Oregon was practicing, their amateur version of rewriting history. You don't like something? Oh, it never existed. It's gone. It's not there. Fortunately, Google Cache or Google Cache was there to find it, and that's how we actually have the screenshots and everything else. It's like WhatsApp with that aided in that, and we have all this up here, and it's a amazing development. Beyond that, ClimateGate professor Michael Mann from Penn State University, who loves to tout the fact that Penn State University cleared him of wrongdoing. Penn State University cleared their own cash cow, their $6 million global warming cash cow, of wrongdoing in ClimateGate. Has come out now in defense of Professor Carrie Norgaard, and he's gone beyond the pale, and he calls her, quote, a very respected, responsible scientist. So the ClimateGate scientists some of them have come out and now are defending Professor Norgaard as her own university is disassociating themselves from her, removing the word treatment, removing her webpage, removing her email address. This is right out of the playbook from 1950s Soviet Union.
Well, and I want to be clear, she's a public figure, and I rarely get into how people look because I'm not the best looking person in the world. The photos, all of them, it's not even that she physically looks bad. she looks crazed. And I've had national TV show goofy photos of me and make fun of me. And I didn't call for it to be shut down. And I was simply, here's the lady saying we're crazy and need treatment. And I said, you know, here she is, because it's funny. And that was my only point. But then when you read what she's saying, it's very, very dangerous. It's this idea of they won't debate us on the facts. They just want to silence us. And all of them constantly, I mean, you saw the articles in the last year out of England and Europe and even the U.S. where all these professors say, it's time for green fascism. In fact, guys, search the term real fast here on the fly. I mean, there were a bunch of them the last few years. You know, academic says, I'm sure you know the answer, but let's see if I know it. Academic says, you know, it's time to bring in authoritarianism to force it. What's the name of those? I mean, there's so many of them. Mark, who were they?
Well, just recently, we have Professor Lau from the SUNY, State of New York University, came out and was calling for human engineering to combat global warming. And they're trying to say it's voluntary right now, but it's not going to be voluntary. Once they get this kind of technology, this is very frightening stuff. So we have this on the heels of that, where he's openly calling for psychiatric drugs to make us conserve more, to make us be repulsed at the taste and sight of meat. They're talking about medicating the population. They're talking about making babies smaller in the womb so that we have smaller carbon footprints. Out of England, and I'll just be posting this story, a woman was banned from going to her doctor. And she was actually thrown out of her practice because her carbon footprint was too big by how long she commuted. This is in the actual newspaper. We'll be going up on Climate Depot. This is the insanity.
Whoa. Let me stop you, because they're openly talking about not giving people medical care because they need to go ahead and die under the death panels for your carbon footprint. I've seen, you know, the New York Times say, hey, the recession depression is good because it lowers carbon footprint. You're telling me in England now they're saying, hey, you can't come see the doctor because you're commuting too far. That's what they talk about in those weird Planopolis things they show kids, where people think it's a joke that we made, you know, making them look like fascists. No, this is what they really want.
Yeah, 83 or 82-year-old woman got a formal letter saying she no longer could go to the surgery center because it was considered too far in her carbon footprint. They urged her to find a closer one. They would no longer see her. The lady is in stunned disbelief.
But wait a minute. Prince Charles has royal trains, dozens of aircraft, but he says don't take a hot bath.
Yes, and that's right. And Al Gore has, of course, private jets and limousines. And, of course, he says take city transit. Don't bother with, don't bother with your own car, or, you don't even drive a hybrid. He tells you to take the city bus. When was the last time Al Gore was on a city bus? And I'm not making that up. When Al Gore and Leonardo DiCaprio came out at the Academy Awards, they flashed on the screen when Al Gore won his Oscar, use city transit. They had these little helpful hints. When was the last time Leonardo DiCaprio was on the city bus? This is that idea that the masses have one set of rules, and the leaders, i.e. the Politburo.
It's pure eugenics, double standard. They want us out of their way. The good news is they are being exposed. I mean, I'll be getting my hair cut and hear women talking about how it's all a scam, global warming attacks people. All the liberals I know have pretty much woken up to it.
Even President Obama now says it's not even possible to talk about climate change because the members don't buy it. So it's amazing. His fellow Democrats aren't with him. But the problem is they're doing this all behind the scenes bureaucratically right now. So even if the public rejects it, even if Congress rejects it, we're still getting it. And that's what we're getting through the unelected bureaucrats at the EPA. In a way, they're having the ultimate final victory behind the scenes there. We've won every battle, but we're losing the war. That's the irony of this whole thing.
Because the system controls the dominant media. They control the systems like YouTube. YouTube, owned by Google, put a light bulb on Earth Hour up over the weekend. And at first, it had a light switch where you could dim your pixels. I guess the dark age is good for humanity, that Maurice Strong talks about a post-industrial world. But then later I went back for the second half of the day, and it was just automatically dark, automatically flipped to dark. So it's this idea.
They always start out by saying it's voluntary, and then eventually it doesn't turn out voluntary. We saw this with seatbelt laws across the country. Every state, well, it's just voluntary. You don't have to wear a seatbelt, but we're making it voluntary. And then cops won't pull you over for it. Then soon it became mandatory. This is the way they do it. And this is this human engineering, along with what Professor Norgaard is talking about, in the treatment. It starts out, they emphasize, oh, it's going to be voluntary. But guess what? Once you get into it, once it starts, it's not voluntary after it begins. And that's what's so scary about this. That's the history of government, history of people. The most violent institutions throughout history have been governments. And people need to remember that when we empower governments and institutions with what they're talking about, the ability to do psychiatric drugs to make us like and dislike things, the ability to shrink ourselves to reduce our carbon footprint, the ability to tell us we can't go to a doctor because we're commuting too far and our carbon imprint is too big, the ability to regulate our shower heads, the ability to destroy washing machines with Energy Star regulations, the ability to destroy our ice makers, the abilities to take away SUVs because of carbon-based fares, the ability to control your thermostat, the ability to skyrocket your electricity rates. It just goes on and on. They literally will control every aspect of our lives. As the German climate advisor said, a CO2 budget for every man, woman, and child.
Hey, Germany, as you know, passed regulations that by 2020-something, you're not allowed to have a single-parent home. You've all got to live in communal homes. And Der Spiegel, I remember a few years ago, had an article like this was reasonable. I mean, this is total corporate Borg, pod people, crazy cult. And then I make a joke and say, look at this person. You know, she says we're crazy. She looks crazy. But like you said, hey, let's stick to what she says. The point is, it's still, she's a public figure. It's my joke. And they're going to shut me down for that. I mean, it just shows their authoritarian impulse is so frightening.
Yeah, and I remember it was Popular Science, I believe, a few years ago, had an article, can we just allow people to reproduce willy-nilly? And their idea was essentially that the government would control sperm banks. And if a couple or someone wanted to have a child, you'd have to go apply for it, do all the paperwork, and the government would decide based on, you know, population numbers and economic factors and sociological factors, whether your area, whether you could actually have these children. This is just the impulse of the intellectual left, and it's been that way. If you look at the history of the 20th century, this is what they do. They think it's just bean counters. It's the arrogance, the fatal arrogance of this central planners. The more the plans plan, the more the planners plan, and that's what they have this impulse where they want to control all aspects. Regulating carbon is a wonderful way for them to do it. Upcoming UN summit in Rio is going to be regulating all aspects of our life. As I mentioned last time, it's going to cover endangered species, it's going to cover sustainable development. So they're going to be able to talk about the waterways, transportation, deforestation, agriculture. Every aspect of human endeavor will be subject to Earth regulations so we don't dishonor the rights of Mother Earth. And that phrase, rights of Mother Earth, has actually appeared at the most recent UN conference. We're not making this stuff up.
And really, it's just about them having a total power grab. We're about to end this interview. I know you've got to go, Mark, and get back to your work at climatedepot.com, but I did find one of those articles I mentioned. There's so many. Let's put it up on screen. Global warming alarmist calls for eco-gulags, his words, not mine, to re-educate climate deniers. And again, we went and searched, arrest climate deniers, imprison them, and we found dozens of professors, U.S., England, Europe, and it's all the same. And we have Dr. Pianka at the Texas Academy of Sciences getting a standing ovation when he said, bring in Chinese police state, arrest people, kill 90%. And now, I mean, I've seen one of the heads of the Green Party in England call for this. A Finnish environmentalist guru has gone further than any other global warming alarmist and openly calling for fascism as a necessary step. And he goes on to say, we will re-educate in gulags. We will do all this. We will arrest you. We will, discipline, probation, enforcement, and oppression. These are their words.
Yeah.
How they're going to oppress us. I mean, can't people see that this political correctness is a way to flog us into submission to these people? It has nothing to do with the environment, and it's all about their total will to power. You say we're winning the intellectual battle but losing the war because these authoritarians squat on us in their hippie camo garb. They're not even really hippies. They're just total control freaks. How do we defeat them? How do you see this unfolding? What can we do to defeat the greatest threat to human liberty?
Well, right now, the greatest threat to human liberty is going to be coming through the Environmental Protection Agency. And we need to defund the EPA. We need to cripple the EPA's ability to regulate these coal plants, to regulate carbon dioxide. And this is what's happening, despite the fact that Congress failed to do anything, the United Nations failed to do anything. President Obama has the U.S.